Okay, so today we're just going to continue trying to get the algorithm to work and just making sure that we actually can trigger it on the backend side so that we know that we don't have to rely on the client basically triggering a backend function. But I don't know if I'm even able to do anything yet. Because right now I need to somehow log into the actual database, which I don't know if we even have like a... Oh yeah, that's what I was doing. So we don't have like a user for the database, which is what Mr. ChatGPT thought. So I think if we deploy updated filtering function, git status. Okay, so we have now updated it so that we have the correct code, which is using bodo3.dynamo blah 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 to do the function. So now what we want to do is, I think if we search for deployed backend resources and we search for function, we have Lambda function, filter users. And this has Bodo3. So this should be the right one. Now we just need to know how to test this. Okay, so what I need to think through now, what I was thinking from the start was that we create just a list of combined user IDs. So we have woman A combined with male A, and their user IDs get concatenated into one. So that becomes like AA, let's say. And then we do the same for the next thing, so that's BB, and you just continue. But the idea is actually that we want... Oh, this is actually difficult to think through. What we actually want, because if we just have a combination of two user IDs, then it's going to be really difficult to know which user should get that ID, because the reason that we're concatenating two user IDs is to create a unique identifier for the phone call that these two users are going to have. So if we know that user A and user B are going to have a phone call, then it makes sense to take their IDs and combine them, because then I don't know if it makes sense actually, but I think it makes sense, because it's a way to create a really long and unique ID for the phone call, but that is also going to be specific to the two users that are going to have the phone call. However, it's a little bit, or I'm not sure how to, I need to think through rather how that would work, because what I was thinking is that we just create these lists of concatenated user IDs, and then we send that to each user. So then each user has a list of the IDs of the phone calls that they're going to have. But the problem is that we need to know... Okay, so wait. That could work if we know the length of a user ID. Then that could work, because we can then create a list for each user, and then we can request that list based on the fact that we know the user ID of the person. So each person will have a unique list, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but am I even recording the screen? No, I'm not recording the screen. So let me try to show you. what I mean. So we have Cal, and my ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we have Aria, and her ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Then we have John, and his ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. And then we have Ned, and his ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9. So let's say that we want all these people to have a phone call. Wait, actually, we need Daenerys, and her ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 4. And then we have, what's another name from the show? Liana. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2. Okay, so these are the IDs. So what we can do this to make it a little bit more clear. All right, so let's say that we have these two groups of users, so women, and then we have the men. So what we want is each person should have a list of 3 users that they're going to have a phone call with. So Cal should have a list of 3 phone calls with Arya, Daenerys, and Lyanna. And then John will have the same, Ned will have the same, and vice versa. So Arya will have the same, Daenerys, blah, blah, blah. And we need to make sure that the combination of each is such that 2 people aren't scheduled to have a phone call with the same person at the same time. So we need that order to be unique. And we need each user to have a list of who they're going to have a phone call with. So my list will be completely unique, John's list will be completely unique, and so on and so forth. And the way to do that, I think, is that we know that the ID is 6 numbers long. So then if the backend side creates the lists of all the different users that are going to have the phone calls, then each user on the client side can then just request their list based on the fact that we know the ID of the user that needs to request the list. And we also know that a user ID is only 6 numbers long. And we also know that for Cal's list, the first number or the first 6 numbers in the call ID will correspond to his user ID. So we can send a request to the database. So get the list of calls where the first 6 numbers in the call ID corresponds to Cal's user ID, if that makes sense. So we essentially say that, okay, the first call that I will have will be this plus this. And so then we know that John's first call cannot be with Arya. So John's first call can be with Daenerys. And Ned's first call can't be with Daenerys or Arya, so it's going to have to be with Lyanna. And then Cal's second call can be with this one. And Cal's third call can be with Liana. So then I will have that list of all the phone calls that I will have or that I will be doing, and that will be connected to my user by my ID. So we might actually need to add this to the backend so that we have a database of all the calls that are going to be made. Because right now we have a database for the users, we have a database for the likes, matches, but we're probably going to need a table for all the different calls as well. I think this is really interesting. Like, it's such a... I think this is really good for my brain, to be honest, because I have to think through things and try to come up with solutions to stuff that I've never really done before. And it's also fun, like, it's just fun to try to think of these things. It's not fun when it doesn't work, but it's a lot of fun just trying to come up with, like, okay, what's a good way to kind of handle this? And it just feels so cool that I have the database, that I can now query things, and I can also create algorithms on the backend side. Like, all this stuff is coming together, and it's actually like, it's such a cool feeling to just know that, like, even though I wouldn't be very fast at it, I could create pretty much whatever I want. Like, this is how Instagram works, this is how Facebook works, this is how WhatsApp works, this is how all these apps, they work like this. Like, the stuff that I'm doing here, this is what they're all made from. Even though they're probably done way better than what I'm going to be doing or be creating here, it's still based on the same fundamental principles. There's nothing really magical that I'm missing, which I think is really cool. Because now it's mostly just my own imagination or my own I don't know. No, I'm like, the only limitation now is just like, how do I want to set it up? I can decide if the phone calls is going to be the IDs. I can try to figure out how to create lists that are going to be unique to each user, and that's going to make sure that two users aren't connected to the same person at once, because each person has to have a unique person that's also available for the call at the same time. All these problems are problems that I think are quite interesting and fun to try to solve. And it's sort of fun when you have to stop and you just have to actually, like, you have to put pure thinking into a solution, which I feel like doesn't happen too much in other places in my life, but it happens a lot with coding. It's just like you have to stop and you just have to think through, like, what are the steps again, and how is this going to actually look and work? But I think what we need is this to be a relational thing. So there needs to be a relationship with my user ID, because we want to easily be able to query the database based on my user ID and just get my list. So really what we want in the database, I think, is going to be user ID, something like that. And then we're going to have call 1 is going to be this. And that's essentially what's going to be stored in the database, I think, because we want to be able to query this later on. So that's going to be the model. All right, we're just going to have to create this, I guess. All right, we have the call list added to the database. So that is now interesting, because now we can actually start creating, we can create a backend function that will add a call or sort people out and create calls. Great explanation of what we're going to do. ID, caller ID, calls. Okay. Actually, we can just do it ourselves, I just realized. Enter calls. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to create a Lambda function that does it for us. All right, let's see if this actually, I just tested the code, and it seems like we got the status code 200, so it seems like we did do what we want, but we can check this by just going to the data manager and then checking our call list. There's nothing to display here in this list. No records to display, which means that we didn't add anything to the database. Okay, we might need to add a new permission as well. So we need to go to the roles again, and we need to add a permission, create inline policy, JSON, and then we just copy what this is, copy that, delete that, and replace it. Next, create policy, policy name. I mean, ChatGPT right now is such a life hack. Like sometimes it's just so, it just makes things so easy. Okay, let's try to run it again. Message call is created. An error occurred, resource not found exception when calling the put item request. Resource not found. Caller. Okay. All right, I think we actually have it now. So this is what the function looks like, the code. And we basically get the users from the database, find matches for them, and then add it to the call list. The only thing that we don't do is we don't sort them so that we don't sort them so that two people don't have the same calls at the same time, or one person isn't ordered to be in the same call with two people at once. So that's something that we need to add. But I think this is pretty good still. Now we can also improve this by a lot by adding like the distance thing. Right now we're only checking, is user A interested in, or what gender? We're basically just sorting people by gender. That's all that we're doing right now. But the better thing would be then to start looking at the specific preferences. Specifically distance is going to be the one that we want to look at. But then the question is, like, when you launch an app like this, we don't know how many users are going to be available. And I don't know how Tinder did that from the start, because maybe they just launched it in like a specific area and everyone in that area was close enough that it would make sense to match. Because right now, let's say that I launch this app. Like, I don't know how I'm going to launch it actually. From the start, I was thinking of just launching it in Sweden and just having people here. But even here, it's just like, if you're in the south of Sweden versus the north of Sweden, it's far enough that it's like, you're not going to really want to be dating if you can choose not to. So then you're probably going to go for a different dating app where there's more people and they're closer to you. So, but if you only have 10 users in an app, it's very unlikely that those 10 users are going to be in the exact same spot. So one way to go around that is to have events where you sign up for the event in the area that you're in. So let's say that we have a Stockholm event, for instance, then you can sign up to, well, I want to be a part of the Stockholm event. And then you can actually decide the location that you want to be a part of. That would be a way to kind of bypass that, because then people can select. But the problem again becomes if there's only like 10 users and they're all scattered all over the place, then if there's only one user in Stockholm that signs up for the Stockholm event, then it won't be very fun for that person because there won't be anyone else in the event. I don't really know how to do that or how to handle it, because it's just such a, it's a difficult problem when I don't know if I'm going to have too many users or too few users when it starts. And I think if I want to like prepare for something, I don't want to prepare for too many users, because that's not, like, too many users actually solves a lot of problems, but too few users creates problems. So if I assume that we're going to have too many users, then I'm going to not have any plans or like any way to deal with the issues that could come up when you have too few users. So, yeah. Actually, what we want to add too, I just realized, is we want to have a day for this. So we want to have like the day of the event, because as one user, I can actually participate in several events spaced out, and we want to keep track of like, okay, in this first event, this guy talked to these people, and so in the next event, we don't want him to talk to the same people again, so he's not going to be able to talk to them, and then we want to be able to request that. Yeah, so we need to add that. But it's almost 3 hours now, so we're going to have to do that in the next video. But we're really on our way right now. We're creating algorithms on the backend side, running them, and doing a lot of really good things. What I would like to do is actually delete all of this and then add the correct code here and do a git. So now the filtering function works, but there's still some things that we need to do. We need to make sure that the order of the lists are in such a way that one user doesn't end up with two people at the same time. We also need to add the day of the event so that we can, because as soon as a new user signs up, this is what it's going to be like at the start. As soon as a new user signs up, we're going to be adding them to lists for other users until those users' lists are full. And then once they're full, then we move on to adding them to new users or whatever. Or we're going to do this live when the event starts. We're going to create the lists. Actually, yeah, we probably need events as well. So we're going to do, just before we quit, we're going to write down a little bit of what we need to get done. So to do event Okay, so these are going to be the next things that we need to do. We need to add events into the database, and then we need to add event IDs to the call lists, and then we need to sort the lists to make sure that we don't double, we don't do any 2-to-1 calls. Okay. So that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I'll see you in the next one.